The notification sound cut through the silence of my Miami studio like a knife. I set down my restoration brush and picked up my phone, expecting another mundane message from Mara about dinner plans or her latest real estate deal. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Instead, I got a slap in the face disguised as a text. "I'm not your property. I'll be late tonight. Don't call. Out with Lucas and the team." I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Marriage is like restoring old paintings. Sometimes you realize what's underneath is uglier than the cracks on the surface. My name is Nick Foster, and I'm 39 years old. I used to be a failed artist until I discovered I had a talent for bringing other people's masterpieces back to life. Now I restore damaged artwork from Miami's elite, working from a converted loft that overlooks the beach. It's honest work, even if it doesn't come with the social status my wife craves. Mara Foster, soon-to-be ex-wife, apparently, is everything I'm not. She's ambitious, beautiful, and ruthlessly social. At 36, she's built a real estate empire selling luxury condos to tech entrepreneurs and drug money launderers who call themselves cryptocurrency investors. She fits into Miami's scene like I fit into a tuxedo, awkwardly and with visible discomfort. Lucas Dunn is her latest obsession. He's a tech entrepreneur who made millions selling an app that helps people cheat on their taxes legally. He's got the kind of smug confidence that comes from never facing real consequences, and he treats everyone around him like employees. I typed back, "I'm not your husband anymore. Don't come back." Then I turned off my phone. 10 minutes later, the buzzing started. 20 missed calls in the first hour. I watched the notifications pile up like evidence in a murder trial, each one more desperate than the last. "Nick, answer your phone. We need to talk. Don't be dramatic. I'm coming home." But I wasn't being dramatic. For the first time in years, I was being honest. The next evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed my wife. Not physically, but digitally. We shared a phone plan, which meant I could track her location through the family app she'd insisted we install for safety. The little blue dot led me through Miami's nightlife district, past the clubs where beautiful people go to see and be seen. She ended up at Lucas's penthouse in Brickell, the kind of building where the doorman makes more money than most teachers. I parked across the street and waited. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 20th floor apartment, I could see silhouettes moving around. My wife's distinctive laugh carried down through the warm Miami air, mixing with music and the sound of expensive champagne being opened. At midnight, I saw them on the balcony. Mara was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Lucas had his hands on her waist, and they were kissing like teenagers who'd just discovered what tongues were for. I took pictures with my phone's zoom lens. Not because I needed proof, I'd known for months, but because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment I stopped being a victim and started being something else entirely. A security guard appeared behind me, tapping on my car window. He was a mountain of muscle stuffed into a uniform that looked like it might split at the seams. "You can't park here, buddy," he said when I rolled down the window. "Just leaving," I replied, but as I started the engine, I saw him taking a picture of my license plate. The next morning, I woke up to find myself internet famous. Someone had posted a video on social media with the caption, "Creepy husband caught stalking his wife's boyfriend." The footage showed me sitting in my car, looking up at Lucas's building like a lost puppy. The comments were brutal. Pathetic. "Get a life, loser." No wonder she's cheating. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Nicholas, what in God's name is going on? Your father's golf buddies are sending him links to some video of you acting like a stalker." "It's complicated, Mom." "Complicated? You're all over the internet looking like a fool. And Mara called me this morning crying, saying you've lost your mind." I hung up and threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall next to a painting I'd been working on, a restoration of a 1920s portrait of a Miami socialite. The woman in the painting had the same cold smile as my wife. That's when I noticed something was wrong with my studio. The lock on the door had scratches around it, and my work table had been moved slightly. Someone had been here. Then I saw it, spray painted across my largest canvas in red letters, Cuck. Below it, Lucas had signed his name with a flourish, like he was autographing a baseball. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the destruction of months of work. Then I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood the game we were playing. They wanted to humiliate me? Fine. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how creative a man can get when he has nothing left to lose. I picked up my phone and made a call. Lila, it's Nick Foster. Remember when you said if I ever needed a private investigator you knew someone good? Well, I need the best. Lila Martinez turned out to be everything I needed and nothing I expected. She was a former Miami police detective who'd gone private after getting tired of dealing with corrupt cops and politicians. She had the kind of sharp intelligence that could cut through lies like a laser through butter. Your wife and her boyfriend are sloppy, she told me over coffee 3 days later. Rich people always think money makes them untouchable, so they don't bother covering their tracks. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs, financial records, and transcripts of recorded conversations. Lucas Dunn isn't just a tech entrepreneur, she continued. He's been running an art forgery operation out of his penthouse. He buys real pieces, has them copied by artists in China, then sells the originals on the black market while displaying the fakes. Your wife's been helping him find wealthy clients through her real estate contacts. I flipped through the evidence, my restoration expert's eye immediately spotting the telltale signs of forgery in the photographs. This is worth millions in fraud. Gets better. See this? She pointed to a transcript. This is from last week, Lucas and Mara talking about you. I read the words that would be burned into my memory forever. Mara. He's so pathetic, sitting in that studio all day, playing with old paintings like a child with crayons. Lucas, why don't you just divorce him? Mara. Because I need his signature on some property documents first. The beach house is in both our names, and it's worth $3 million now. Once that's sorted, I'll dump him and take half of everything. Lucas. What if he fights back? Mara. Nick, please. He doesn't have the balls to fight back. He'll just sit there and take it like he always does. I closed the folder and looked up at Lila. How much do you charge for the full revenge package? She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. For a case this satisfying? Let's call it a professional courtesy. The plan we developed was simple, but devastating. First, we'd destroy Lucas's business reputation. Then, we'd expose Mara's role in the fraud to her real estate clients. Finally, we'd humiliate them both in the most public way possible. It started with Lucas's smart home system. Lila had discovered that he'd hired a bargain basement tech company to install his home automation, and they'd left several security vulnerabilities. While he was doing a live TV interview about the future of Miami's tech scene, I triggered every sprinkler in his penthouse. The interview ended with Lucas soaking wet, screaming at his malfunctioning house, while water destroyed thousands of dollars worth of fake art. The video went viral within hours, but that was just the opening act. 2 days later, I broke into his parking garage, not to steal anything, but to leave a calling card. I poured a gallon of liquefied shrimp into his Lamborghini's air conditioning system and smeared realistic fake blood across the leather seats. When he started the car the next morning, the smell was so overwhelming that he vomited on his steering wheel. The local news picked up the story when Lucas tried to file a police report, spinning it as Miami tech millionaire claims mysterious prankster destroyed luxury car. The reporter barely managed to keep a straight face while describing the shrimp juice incident. Meanwhile, Lila was working her contacts in the art world. She arranged for several of Lucas's pieces to be examined by experts, who quickly identified them as high-quality forgeries. The story broke in Art News with the headline, "Miami Tech Entrepreneur's Collection Revealed as Elaborate Fake." Lucas's business partners started distancing themselves immediately. His investors pulled their funding. His clients began demanding refunds. But I wasn't done yet. The real masterpiece was still to come. The Miami Beach Art Gala was the social event of the season, and both Mara and Lucas would be there. It was the perfect venue for the final act of my revenge. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, and carrying a small digital projector I'd borrowed from a friend. The gallery's AV system was surprisingly easy to hack. Rich people never expect their charity events to be infiltrated by angry husbands with nothing to lose. When Mara and Lucas made their grand entrance, fashionably late and dripping with fake confidence, I was ready. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, tapping my champagne glass with a fork, "I'd like to propose a toast to my wife Mara and her business partner Lucas." The crowd turned to look at me, some recognizing me from the viral stalker video. Mara's face went white. "To two people who've taught me that marriage is like art restoration. Sometimes you have to strip away all the pretty layers to see the ugly truth underneath." I pressed a button on my phone, and the gallery's projection screen lit up with audio waveforms. The conversation between Mara and Lucas began playing through the sound system, their voices crystal clear as they mocked me and planned to steal my assets. The room went silent, except for their recorded laughter. When the audio ended, I raised my glass. "To Mara and Lucas, may your lies hang in this gallery longer than your careers." Lucas lunged at me across the room, his face purple with rage. I sidestepped easily, and he crashed into a display of champagne glasses. The sound of breaking crystal mixed with gasps from the crowd as Lucas slipped and fell, his expensive suit soaking up spilled wine. Security guards rushed in to separate us, but the damage was already done. Every phone in the room had been recording, and by morning, the video would have millions of views. As they escorted me out, I turned back to see Mara standing alone in the middle of the gallery, abandoned by Lucas and avoided by everyone else. She looked exactly like the woman in the 1920s portrait I'd been restoring. Beautiful, cold, and utterly hollow. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Lucas's remaining business partners sued him for fraud and breach of contract. His penthouse was seized by creditors. The FBI opened an investigation into his art forgery operation. Mara's real estate license was suspended pending an ethics investigation. Her wealthy clients, embarrassed by their association with the scandal, dropped her immediately. The beach house she'd planned to steal was frozen by court order until the divorce proceedings were complete. But I wasn't finished yet. 3 weeks after the gallery incident, Mara tried to break into my studio. She was desperate for money and thought she could steal some of my restored paintings to sell. What she didn't know was that I'd been expecting her. I was waiting in the dark when she jimmied the lock and crept inside. She went straight for my most valuable piece, a restored Monet I was preparing to return to a collector. "Looking for something?" I asked, turning on the lights. She spun around, the painting clutched in her hands like a shield. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her perfect hair was a mess, and she had the wild look of someone who'd lost everything. "This is half mine," she snarled. "Everything in this marriage is half mine." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone to record, "it's not. See, I never filed for divorce. We're still married, which means you're still legally responsible for half of our debts. And thanks to your little fraud scheme with Lucas, we have a lot of debts now." Her face crumpled as the reality hit her. "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourself." I held up my phone, still recording. "Smile, sweetheart. You're about to be internet famous again." The video of Mara's breakdown, posted with the caption, "Not your property, not my wife either," got 5 million views in the first day. Lucas, meanwhile, had fled Miami in disgrace. Last I heard, He was living in his mother's basement in Ohio, trying to sell insurance over the phone. But the real masterpiece came when my lawyer called with news about the divorce proceedings. "Nick, you're not going to believe this," he said. "Remember how Mara kept all your financial documents and handled the taxes? Well, she made some creative deductions that the IRS is very interested in discussing with her, personally. It turned out that Mara's attempts to hide assets from me had created a paper trail that led straight to tax fraud. She was now facing federal charges that could land her in prison for 5 years. The final confrontation happened on Miami Beach, under a sky heavy with storm clouds. Mara and Lucas, somehow back together in their shared misery, cornered me as I was walking home from dinner. "You destroyed our lives," Mara screamed, her voice carrying over the sound of waves. "We had everything." "You had nothing," I replied calmly. "You had lies and fraud and stolen money. I just showed everyone what was really underneath." Lucas stepped forward, trying to look threatening despite his obvious desperation. "You think you're so smart? You think you won?" "I know I won." I pulled out a USB drive and held it up like a trophy. "This contains every piece of evidence about your art forgery operation, your tax fraud, and your plans to steal from me. It's already been copied to the FBI, the IRS, and every major news outlet in the country." A crowd had gathered around us, drawn by the shouting. Phones were out, recording everything. Lucas looked around at the audience and seemed to deflate. "You want to know the difference between us?" I continued, my voice carrying clearly in the humid air. "You thought I was weak because I was quiet. You thought I was stupid because I was trusting. But I was just waiting for the right moment to show you exactly who you were dealing with." Thunder cracked overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. "I may not be your husband anymore, Mara," I said, looking directly into her eyes. "But I am the last man you'll ever underestimate." Lightning illuminated the beach as I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the rain, surrounded by strangers with cameras, their lives in ruins and their futures destroyed. Behind me, I could hear Mara crying and Lucas trying to explain to the crowd that it was all a misunderstanding, but nobody was listening anymore. 6 months later, I received 2 pieces of mail on the same day. The first was my final divorce decree. The second was a newspaper clipping from my mother with a note attached. "Thought you'd want to see this." The headline read, "Former Miami real estate agent sentenced to 3 years for tax fraud." Below, it was a smaller story. "Tech entrepreneur pleads guilty to art forgery charges." I pinned both articles to the wall of my studio, right next to the restored portrait of the 1920s socialite. She didn't look cold anymore. Now she just looked like a woman who'd learned an expensive lesson about the difference between being clever and being wise. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. I know you'll never forgive me, but I'm sorry." I deleted it without responding and went back to work on my latest restoration, a damaged painting of a phoenix rising from ashes. Some things, I'd learned, are worth saving. Others are better left to burn.